Blackwell.
Good afternoon, my lady. The next witness is Mrs. Rabinda Sherwood. May she be sworn, please?
Would you like to stand?
Yeah. I swear according to the Sunda Gutka that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Please stand. Thank you for coming along to help us.
Will you give us your full name, please?
Yes, that's Rabinda Sherwood.
Thank you. Mrs. Sherwood, I hope that you have before you a copy of your witness statement. It's at INQ 000651047. Please, can you confirm that that is the statement that you've provided for this module of the inquiry?
Yes.
And that it's true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Sherwood, you're giving evidence today on behalf of COVID Bereaved Families for Justice UK and also on behalf of yourself. COVID Bereaved Families for Justice UK is an organisation of approximately 7,000 members, all of whom have lost a loved one to COVID-19. Is that right?
Yes.
It began as a campaign founded in March of 2020 with the purpose of learning lessons throughout the pandemic and in order to save lives. Is that right?
Yes.
As Matt Fowler and Joanna Goodman have explained in their statements to the inquiry in modules 1 and 2, the organisation came into being following Joanna losing her father and Stuart Goodman and Matt losing his father, Ian Fowler, in April of 2020. And an article was published about Joanna's loss, to which Matt left a comment, and that's how they came to be in contact with each other. You have been a member of the organisation since the summer of 2021, is that right?
Yes.
In March of 2022, you were appointed operations officer and you worked in that role for about 10 months, during which time you performed various tasks in order to, in your words, maintain its survival. And since that time, you have remained a member, but whilst you were acting as operations officer, you were the only bereaved member of staff, is that right?
Yes.
The organisation has campaigned for the establishment of this inquiry, and you describe at paragraph 5 in your witness statement how your members have, at every turn, fought for lessons to be learned as soon as possible to prevent other families from suffering as your members have. You say that COVID-19 has touched every corner of our communities, and so the membership of your organisation reflects a broad demographic united by the aim to learn lessons and save lives in this and future pandemics. And you say that the organisation continues to campaign for and engage with devolved inquiries into the handling of the pandemic.
Yes.
I'm going to come a little later in your evidence to look at some of the information which you are able to provide to the inquiry about your members and the experiences that they have told you about. But first of all, I'd like to ask you about your own experience of the pandemic, please.
Okay, so I lost my mum and dad in January 21, 10 days apart in the same hospital. It's the worst time of my life. It's left myself and my family traumatised. And it's not, of course, losing someone is hard. Even losing someone in, say, sudden death circumstances is incredibly hard. When you lose someone to COVID, when you know that they did not get the treatment that they deserved, we know that for a fact. We didn't get to say goodbye. They died alone. Again, we know that. And the circumstances around all that all lead to this prolonged grief that me and my family all still feel 5 years later on.
The way in which you describe it at paragraph 7 in your statement is in these words: the isolation, guilt, confusion and frustration resulting from losing a loved one to COVID-19 is something that will take a long time to heal. And we will look at some of those aspects of your experience as we go through your evidence. The last time that you saw your parents was at Christmas 2019, is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then shortly into 2020, news of COVID-19 began to arrive. You describe, however, there was no alarm from the government. What do you mean by that?
There seemed to be, it was something that was happening on the other side of the world. It's fine, we'll be okay here in the UK. No cause for alarm. We don't need to take any measures.
But you as a family did take measures, didn't you?
We were absolutely wanting to ensure we protected our parents especially. So we'd already, before the official March 23rd lockdown, we were already talking to them about how, we don't know the root causes of this. Do start to just not go out as much, don't socialise. There's something happening, but we're not getting clear guidelines from the government. So what can we do to protect ourselves?
And you say that your mother particularly struggled with the suggestion that she stay at home because she was a particularly sociable woman.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you say it was difficult to watch your parents as they isolated themselves from the world, but you believed that that was the best thing for them. Yeah,
there's so much guilt as well, and you find yourself questioning yourself about anything and everything, and it was such a chaotic time, and just with a lack of clarity, we all as a family just did what we thought was best.
And so once the lockdown arrived, or the orders to lockdown in March of 2020, your parents continued doing what they had been doing for a couple of months by then.
Yes, they tried to continue to protect themselves.
You had what you describe as being a usual call with them on Saturday, the 2nd of January of 2021. And during that call, both of your parents told you that they weren't feeling great and that your dad had a temperature that hadn't reduced even though he'd taken medication to help him. And so you continued to keep in touch over the weekend, but your father was taken into hospital on the Monday, the 4th of January, because his position hadn't improved, had it?
That's right.
And then after being taken into hospital, were you able to speak to your father, to communicate with him?
No. All communication had to be done via the doctors and nurses on Dad's ward, which we struggled to get hold of a lot of the time.
I think you had no update at all about his progress for the first 48 hours that he was hospitalised, is that right?
That's correct.
And you say that you understand that the circumstances would have been extremely difficult for the staff, but nevertheless, that lack of information caused you anxiety.
Of course, yes. We weren't allowed to visit, so that was our only means of getting any update.
On the 6th of January, were you told that your father would be discharged and that carers were needed to be arranged for that to take place?
Yes, that's correct.
Were you asked to become involved in searching for those carers?
Yes, I had to find carers. The requirements were 2 sets of carers 4 times a day, and so I spent the rest of that entire day calling round all the agencies and whether they would be happy to go into a home where it was known that also that my dad had COVID.
And was your father discharged from hospital?
No.
Why not?
So the way we found out that Dad had COVID, by the way, is it was dropped into conversation by his physiotherapist, who had been with Dad and seeing if he could do steps and his ability, what his mobility was like in order to come home. He assumed that we knew, we didn't, And that was the first we'd heard of it. Looking at the medical records, actually, he was diagnosed 48 hours before, but we weren't told. And when it was dropped into conversation, I asked the physiotherapist, well, how can it be that Dad can come home? Am I going to even be able to find any carers that would be willing to come into the house? Is this right? That, you know, is there no more care that can be done for Dad? And I was told they need the bed and he should be able to leave the next day if we can get the care in place. That didn't happen because they then changed their mind on the Monday, the 11th, and then he died at some point, we think on the Tuesday.
So on the 11th of January, your father was still in hospital.
Yes.
You discovered that he had tested positive for COVID.
Yes.
And you then got a call later that day to say that he was quickly deteriorating. Is that right?
Yes, that was Monday the 11th in the morning. And so we'd gone from talking about Dad being discharged, the equipment he'd need, getting carers in, to, actually, if you'd want to see your dad, you'd better start making the journey. It was 2.5 hours away from home. So my husband and I drove up, and where I was then shouted and called a super spreader. I explained that I'd been asked to come in. I asked what the PPE protocol was. I'd never been in a COVID ward. And I was told, well, if you're happy to take my nurse's PPE and you'll still be able to sleep at night, go ahead. And even then, before I could actually get to my dad's bed, I had his doctor in my face telling me, you really need to sign this DNAR. And I still hadn't seen Dad at this point.
And that's at the DNA CPR
Yes.
letter to confirm that you were content that
Yes.
he not be resuscitated in those circumstances. Were you able to sit with your father for about an hour?
Yeah.
And you were able to converse with him?
Dad we had a very, it was a normal conversation. As soon as he saw me, he recognised me. He asked how I'd got here. I explained that they only allowed one person at the bedside, and that's why my husband had to stay in the car park. He asked about the children, all the grandchildren. We had a normal conversation. This is after the doctor had followed me to Dad's bed, and again was then shouting in Dad's face about signing this DNA CPR, which I had to ask her to step away from. And after all that, we did. We just had a normal conversation.
Right. So, and so you found it difficult to accept that his condition was being treated as being very serious?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At midnight on the 11th of January, did your father's doctor call to request permission to switch him to end-of-life care?
Yes, they did, to which we absolutely remained firm, as we had done, that is not to happen. He's to be given all the care and treatment possible.
By this time, had your mother been admitted to the same hospital?
Yes, Mum had been admitted on Saturday the 9th.
And she had been taken to a ward on the floor below your father, is that right?
Yes.
And you asked whether they could be placed together, and you were told that wasn't going to happen.
Yes, I'd seen it on the news where there was this couple in the same hospital who'd been married about the same number of years that my parents had, and they'd wheeled their beds together and they were holding hands, and I thought, that much as it's just awful, at least they'd be together. And they laughed when I asked for that.
The following morning, on the 12th of January, your sister called the hospital for an update and was advised that your father had passed away. Is that right?
That's right.
And she was also told that the next of kin had been informed. You only learned about his death through your sister, and you were your father's next of kin and should have been informed.
I was the next of kin. They, in one conversation, the doctors claimed they'd left a voice message. Then another doctor said, no, we actually spoke to the next of kin. I had no missed calls. Me and my family were not sleeping in January 21. We had our phones by our sides the whole time, day and night, just waiting to hear updates. And to hear that they'd spoken to someone, it left me wondering, well, have you now told the wrong family? Or indeed, are you even talking about my dad? It led to such confusion. Thankfully, my sister was on her way up there, so she had to go to my dad's bed and confirm that they were actually talking about our dad.
Yeah.
Very confusing.
And because your mother was still in hospital at the time of your father's death, you as a family had to make a decision as to whether or not to inform her of your father's passing. And did you decide to tell her or not?
We decided that we'll never know if it's the right decision. We decided not to. We were concerned it might impact her recovery. You know, she'd been married to my dad since she was 19. It's a decision we made, but yes, I rethink. It's one of the many decisions we think about.
You say at paragraph 22 in the statement that you obtained agreement from the doctors looking after your mother that should her condition decline, she would be admitted to the ICU for treatment. But by Monday morning, that agreement was retracted. Will you tell us about that, please?
Yes, so my sister had conversations and I believe email confirmation that should my mum need it, that she would be admitted to ICU. They knew at this stage that we'd lost Dad, and so there was some relief, reassurance that, you know, that my mum would at least get all available treatment. When I went up on Monday, that Monday following that weekend, again, before I could even see my mum, I was ushered into a small room. This is January 21. The rules were you were absolutely not meant to be doing that. I had 5 frontline medical staff. I asked for the meeting to be outdoors, which again, I was dismissed. And all they wanted to talk to me about was, how are we going to get this DNA CPR signed? To which I said, well, why are we not talking about the treatment options? Why are we going straight to this? At the weekend, this is what was agreed, that if you're saying my mum's got worse, you agreed that she would be able to go to ICU. That's when they replied, that's weekend staff, we're the week. They shouldn't have authorised that. They wouldn't have said that. So they were into a dispute as to who said what. And they were just very firm, your mum will never go to ICU. To which I just couldn't understand why. I asked them, what is that? What is the reason? Is it capacity? No, we've got plenty of beds. We're not even at 50%. So why not my mum? And I then actually got to see my mum for half an hour. And then that's when a janitor told me that they're not respecting your mum being vegetarian. They've been giving her meat, but don't worry, when I'm on shift, I swap the dishes out and feed her myself, because he didn't work every day.
How did that make you feel?
We feared that they weren't getting treatment. We feared that even basic rights weren't being
respected.
And then yeah, then to know that for a fact was super hard, especially to leave her.
But may I just ask you about something else that happened before you left her on that occasion? And it's to do with you being provided with a piece of paper with a matrix on it. What was that, please?
So as I was leaving, well, I asked to leave, a ICU doctor said, you wanted to know the reason why your mum would never be admitted to ICU. He sort of threw an A4 piece of paper at me. I couldn't read it. It was illegible. It was very faint font. It was just, but it was clear that they wanted me to leave, so I couldn't ask any further questions. My husband and I drove home. We then spent hours Googling what on earth this piece of paper that meant my mum was not allowed ICU. And then at the footnote is where we then stumbled across actually this is an appendix to the decision-making matrix that I believe all trusts were issued with by the government. So what they'd done is, because my mum was over 65, she was 75, very healthy, and she did have asthma, which was controlled, that equaled no further treatment, not even to be given a chance. And it was cruel especially when they said, oh, we've got plenty of beds.
On the 22nd of January, 10 days after losing your father, your sister received another call from the hospital to advise her to travel to the hospital immediately to be able to see your mother in time. Do you believe that at the time that phone call was made, your mother had already passed away?
We believe that they don't know the exact times of death for either my dad or my mum. And my sister sadly saw both my mum and dad after they'd passed. And what she described is the only indication was dad's hand was warmer than mum's. So we believe, if that's the case, then we believe that mum was not with us when my sister got the call to jump in the car and come up to see her.
Following the passing of both of your parents, did you, as a family, arrange a double funeral for them?
Yes.
To which only 25 people were able to attend. And you say that this was incredibly difficult because both your mother and your father had huge families. Did you, as a family, have to decide who was allowed to go to the funeral?
I mean, yes, by the time we took into account me, siblings, my brother, my sister, and the grandchildren, that didn't leave much room for anyone else. And yeah, it was very small, and in any other circumstances, it wouldn't have been like that.
Your family are Sikh, and you say you tried your best to honour your religious rituals for both of your parents, but that was problematic. You say that a huge part of your culture in general, but particularly following a death, is centred around human contact and physical support. Yeah. And because of the restrictions, that could not take place. Is that right?
That's correct. So normally, and this is all part of why I believe that, COVID loss is so unique and the grief is so elongated. We would be in the family home. We would have all our relatives come by, offering support, talk about them, bringing food, just bringing comfort. And that's how it should have been. But instead, we don't know when they died, how they died. We're just all in our own homes, on our own. And then to turn up to a funeral with 25 people, mustn't touch, mustn't hug. And and then go back to your own respective homes. And when Partygate, as it's known, one example I do want to bring up is on the 14th of January, there was a leaving do of 2 government colleagues. 14th of January, my dad had died 2 days before. My mum was seriously ill in hospital. And it's sickening that we went through all of that. We went through the funeral. We kept to the rules. And to know that that was just one example of the body that created the rules was breaking it themselves is really hard.
You were denied an open casket for both of your parents, and you also talk in your witness statement about the 5 Ks, which is a Sikh ritual. They are religious symbols that your mother, you say, wore without fail. And when you requested them from the hospital, you were told no, and that they had to be destroyed, bringing a significant amount of anxiety to you and your siblings. Is that right?
That's correct.
Did you receive any offer of bereavement support following the death of both of your parents?
We received nothing from the hospital. There didn't seem to be anything available or made public by the government in terms of what to do with all this grief and loss, and it's just impossible to bear.
One thing that we haven't yet touched upon is what you describe as a further impact on society. You say that English wasn't your parents' first language, but they were fairly comfortable with it. And you say that the messaging around COVID-19, nevertheless, was confusing for them, and that it needed translating for them, and that wasn't something which you feel was given sufficient attention by the government in their messaging.
No, it absolutely wasn't. I mean, I found it confusing. I used to do my best I used to speak to them 2-3 times a day, and in trying to translate what the latest messaging was. It particularly stings around, eventually, one key message was that BAME people are more likely to have more negative outcomes if they contracted COVID. However, it was a statement, no guidance, nothing behind that. So again, it was just down to us as a family to try and figure out how to keep ourselves safe.
Mrs. Sherwood, do you believe that the circumstances in which your parents died and what happened thereafter has led to you suffering from prolonged grief?
Absolutely. It's just the greatest loss, and it's been the biggest impact to the family. As I said, people have loss. Sadly, people die. But if you know that they were given the best treatment, they were in the best care, and all options had been exhausted, and somebody was with them when they died, all of that affects your grief because you're stuck. You're stuck in the... I relive January 21 pretty much every single day, and thinking about what we said, decisions we made, was it right? And it's elongated for that reason, for the fact that there is no COVID-specific support available, the fact that people move on, even people's language, isn't it great? We can go on holidays again. We, COVID bereaved, cannot move on. And the only thing now, we've lost our loved ones, the only thing is, how can we ever make sure nobody else will go through this? Because it's incredibly painful.
Well, may we turn to look at some of the information that you've provided to us in your witness statement that reflects upon others in your group, and then we'll return back to allow you to make whatever comments you want to about your own circumstances at the end, Mrs. Sherwood.
Yes.
So let's please look at our Every Story Matters record. It's INQ 000659894. Thank you. And to page 23. Contributors experienced ongoing and profound feelings of anger, sadness and guilt that they could not be with or comfort their loved ones at the end of their life. Many are devastated that their loved one may have felt abandoned at the time they most needed support and love from family and friends. And a bereaved person in England said, "The more I reflect on the fact that I was unable to visit for the last 10 months of her life, I feel incredibly guilty that she died believing she'd been abandoned. I feel robbed of being able to say goodbye, and I'm aware that my mental health has been affected by my feelings of guilt, anger and sadness, which I will have to live with forever." And are those sentiments reflected in many of the stories that you have heard through your group?
Yes, too sadly, it's a yes. Those feelings, the guilt, thinking what were their loved ones thinking, was that why wasn't anyone there for them, and I can't begin to describe the mental health impact it has had and continues to have. And yes, I've heard sadly so many experiences within the bereaved families for justice group on that.
Thank you. Let's scroll down to page 24 and look at 3 other reflections, please. Firstly, a bereaved aunt from England. My inability to have spent any time with my sister at the end of my niece's life or after she died, to actually see her, for me personally, that was very, very distressing. I still don't feel like I was able to say goodbye in any shape or form, and still, 5 years on, I'm so emotional about that. I think others, they have very quickly forgotten the things that we weren't allowed to have available. When I say to people now, it's like, oh, I didn't realise, oh, I'd forgotten that. And I think that's the danger if we don't capture these things. We must never, ever put people in that position again. And further down, please. Thank you. Bereaved people said that their inability to visit dying loved ones meant that they carried long-term guilt about not being able to do more for their loved one. A bereaved friend from England said, "She died without me seeing her, and I could not go to her funeral. She must have felt abandoned, and I'm sure the isolation contributed to her rapid decline." As the pandemic went on, some bereaved people were able to visit their loved ones in hospitals, hospices, and care settings before they died. Visits were often through a window or while wearing PPE. This was heartbreaking for both the loved ones and visitors. It felt impersonal and cold and often added to feelings of anger and guilt for contributors. A bereaved daughter from England said, "I was then not allowed to visit until they felt she was imminently about to die, and to visit once to say goodbye. She was barely conscious and didn't recognise me with all my double mask on, etc. I ended up actually seeing her twice, as she lasted longer than they thought, but basically she was dying in a room on her own for 3 weeks, with no one she loved there to hold her hand and talk to her. I really struggle with this and the guilt, even though I had no power to change the rules. I feel a lot of anger that this was allowed to happen. It is not humane and not logical, as if I was all masked up. Why couldn't I go in every day?" Is there a feeling amongst your group that the messaging and the rules that were being imposed were illogical and certainly not consistent across different hospitals and care homes and other places?
Yeah, I've certainly heard that across the country there was not consistency. It could be a care home in one region would differ from another. Similarly, hospital trusts as well, which is, of course, again, just so distressing that it's like a postcode lottery, that had they been living in a different region, they may well have been able to visit their loved ones.
Thank you. Let's scroll up to page 23, please, and highlight the final quote on that page. I think the most heartbreaking thing for us was that he passed away on his own, alone, and we don't know if he was in pain, if he wasn't in pain, or what was happening. I mean, it just feels unknown, and it has affected us a lot, to be honest. My mum especially, she went through depression after. And that, again, reflects your experience of simply not knowing what happened to your parents at the time that they were dying.
No, and I can't. I have read through every single page of both of their medical records. It's contradictory. It describes how I, as next of kin, agreed to a DNA CPR, then actually on the medical records that it hadn't been agreed. There's just... To get to the truth now is impossible. And again, that does not help with thinking about the lack of care that they had and subsequent grief that we all feel.
And in terms of long-term emotional consequences and trauma, let's just look at a couple of examples of this in the record, please. At page 84, in the pink box, contributors told us, please, if we can highlight that. Thank you. Contributors told us how they continue to live with their grief and how this is often triggered by discussions of the pandemic with friends and family or in the news. A bereaved daughter from England said, "It was a very, very traumatic time, yes. When people say it's nearly 5 years on, it feels as though it was yesterday. Any time anybody mentions, anything that happened, it's still so raw." They told us how painful it had been to see society move on and attempt to downplay the impact of the pandemic. This has left many feeling isolated in their grief. And if we can go to page 73, please, and highlight the final quote on that page. This is from a bereaved daughter in England. "Well, I have a few close friends who did phone and message and things like that, but usually people come and visit you and you have that community around you. That wasn't there during COVID at all. It was isolated. You felt so isolated, on your own, really, really lonely, because you miss it, because you know what happens. You know that, if people die within your family network, people come to your house every day until they get on your nerves because they're coming every day. But that level of support was simply not possible, was it, during the pandemic?"
It wasn't possible because we were told to stay in our bubbles, not to socialise, not to mix, and we followed those rules.
Thank you. In terms of the inability to follow mourning rituals, could we go to page 41 first of all, please, in the record, and highlight the pink box at the top of the page? Contributors also discussed how painful it was that their loved ones didn't have funerals, burials, cremations, or other end-of-life ceremonies that were in line with their wishes, religion, or cultural heritage. They emphasised the continuing anguish and regret among bereaved people because there was no way to get these experiences back. They said this has exacerbated their grief and led to feelings of unresolved sadness for many. A bereaved son said, "The fundamental thing is that the ones who died didn't get the funeral they would have had under normal circumstances, in terms of what was in the funeral, people who would have come and taken part, that was denied to them." And finally, on this topic, please, if we can go to page 40 and highlight the second quote on the page. A bereaved grandson said, "With my granddad, we couldn't even put any clothes on him. He was just wrapped around a rag and put in a box. And that, was very hard, because then you'd want to say, at least get clothing for your loved one for the last time before they get buried. You want them to be buried probably wearing like a shirt and tie or something like that, a suit or something," underlining the importance of being able to bury your loved one in the manner in which you think it is fit and proper.
Yeah.
And what about the option of holding some sort of religious ceremony afterwards? Would that have plugged that gap that had arisen because you weren't allowed to to do those things at the relevant time, or once the moment had gone, was that something, an absence that you have to live with forever?
We did have a religious event some time later on,
Yes.
when rules were lifted and we were allowed to do so. It's just not the same. It's not the spiritual way that how my parents would have wanted their funerals to be. They were very religious. They went to the Gurdwara every day. And to think that, again, part of the guilt that we carry, we just couldn't give them the funeral that they would have wanted.
Bereavement support for members of your group. You tell us at paragraph 53 that members of the group experienced very poor emotional support following the loss of their loved one in a variety of ways. You say many noted that the way they were treated by hospitals and undertakers could be cold and lacked compassion, which made them feel additionally isolated in their grief. Is that right?
Yes.
And you say that access to professional bereavement support was not often available due to resources. And if there was a lack of training and experience in the type of grief that COVID had caused, and the loss that people had suffered as a result of losing a loved one to COVID. And you say group members also expressed concerns about waiting lists.
Yeah.
And the impact of inequalities in accessing support. What sort of information did you receive about inequalities in your members being able to access support?
So a common theme within the group has been the fact that when indeed you could access support of some description, and it was mostly remote, so either audio or video call, even when rules were lifted, it was still difficult to get in-person counselling. The counselling team were just not equipped to deal with and help, therefore, our members who are going to them with this grief, with having lost their loved one, gone through such a traumatic time, that when indeed they could access it, it just wasn't appropriate. And so you're just really left feeling so lonely. And fortunately, we in the group have each other, which has been amazing, brilliant. But we are all questioning that why is there nothing available to us? Why have we just been left? It just feels that the pandemic happened and people are just so desperate to move on. And I wonder if that's why then those sort of support organisations aren't set up. But what do we as COVID bereaved do then in the absence of that? It's extremely difficult.
You describe at paragraph 56 of your statement Alison's experience, and you say that she now suffers from PTSD from the trauma of the pandemic and loss of her mother, Jane. You say that she has long-term depression and anxiety and has been prescribed antidepressants to enable her to get through the day, that she has needed to arrange counselling and talking therapy to feel some normality and to gain some confidence back. And she notes that the pandemic has also affected her children. It's caused them to become more isolated from friends and caused distress to their education. And let's please, finally on this point, go back to the Every Story Matters record and down to page 15 and highlight 2 paragraphs on that page. Thank you. Others found bereavement support through signposting online. For example, one member found a bereavement support service for her and her mother through the COVID-19 Bereaved Families for Justice Facebook group. And your organisation said, or she said, I think I found support through Facebook. I knew she needed to talk to someone. Suddenly, a charity supporting those experiencing sudden deaths were really good. She was taken up in 2 weeks. They prioritised her quite rightly, and I was on the list further down. It is one of the important pieces of work that your group does to signpost people, to help them to access the sorts of support that they might specifically be requiring.
Yes, indeed, because we know how difficult it is. It's not as simple as doing a Google search. So where we can, organisations that we've used that are, some are better than others, they do differ. Yes, we do help our members and signpost them.
The financial impact of bereavement, is this something about which your members have told you their stories and described how difficult they have found coping following the death of a loved one who perhaps was the main breadwinner in the family?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just heartbreaking stories where it is the main breadwinner, perhaps, who has died from COVID and left a family, a wife, children, normally. Again, they're not given any support. They're not given where to go, what to do, what are their options available to them. So as well as coping with the death of their spouse and thinking about the children and just trying to keep a roof over their heads, they're now having to think how they're going to address this financial gap.
Yeah.
It's awful.
And let's look at another reflection along the same lines, please, at the Every Story Matters record, and page 76, please. Many people told us that the death of a loved one brought long-term financial strain, especially when the main income earner died. Some described how stressed and anxious they were about paying their bills and taking care of their families. Loss of income has had an ongoing and life-changing impact on some bereaved people. He was the main breadwinner in our family, which put tremendous financial strain on me and caused extreme anxiety with how to keep a roof over mine and my children's heads. My partner didn't leave a will, and being unmarried meant that I've had to deal with the probate system, which has added further stress to me. And then a bereaved wife from England. When my husband died, I lost not only the love of my life, but also a breadwinner. As the years have gone by, it's got harder and harder. I'm 2 months away from losing everything. I've sold the house and am now downsizing. Some told us they received bereavement support payments from the government following the death of their partner. While this helped bereaved families, those who received it said the support did not last long enough and was not enough to meet their needs. Many still faced significant financial strain and had to rely on friends and family for financial support. A bereaved wife said, "I'm still struggling with losing my husband at 31. I have had huge stress trying to manage financially to maintain my house and take care of my daughter. I'm not entitled to any benefits as my house is owned, mortgaged, and bereavement support only lasts 18 months. And then finally, my dad had to help me financially because the government's bereavement support didn't touch the sides of the rapidly growing bills." So we seem to be seeing there that even those who could access support felt that it wasn't enough.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. You tell us in your witness statement about difficulties experienced by your members in relation to accessing information following the death of their loved one, and also being able to be involved in the investigative mechanisms or processes that might follow. Did you hear from your members that there was often a difficulty persuading a hospital to provide the relevant notes and records of their loved one's death?
Absolutely. It was, whether it was during their stay there or after the event, it was yet another battle to get actually what's rightfully theirs. And this is, I guess, another common theme, that it was so hard losing anybody, and then to try and get access to what is quite within their rights to, it just adds more trauma to all of us who are bereaved.
You mentioned towards the beginning of your evidence about the hospital records relating to both your mother and your father.
Yeah.
Did you manage to obtain those from the hospital?
I did, but it was very difficult, and it took several calls, emails, but I was determined to get them, and I think 8 months it took that year.
And did you discover, once you had the records and you were able to consider their content, that some of the information that you'd been provided with at the time of your mother and father's death did not seem to be borne out by what was in the records?
Yes, I started to read my dad's, and when I came across on the 11th of January, could not reach daughter, 12th of January, early in the morning, still can't reach daughter, will keep trying. I got so angry, I wasn't in the mindset to continue reading. It was lies. They did not. And the fact that this is a legally binding document, this is what should be to families, what they can refer to understand what the care was like for their loved one. We weren't allowed to visit, limited details from the medical staff. So the medical records were super important because perhaps that may provide some reassurance. It did the opposite. There was so much contradictory information, the fact that daughter had agreed to DNA CPR on dad's discharge sheet, no DNA CPR has been agreed, the fact that when dad was admitted, he needs to be in an isolation room, which we only discovered when I looked through the medical records. He was never put into an isolation room. There was just the fact that on Mum's medical records, there's an entry about spoke to Sucha for at some length, the daughter. Well, that's my mum's husband. That was my dad's name. So we couldn't even have an accurate account as to who was talking to who and when and what about. It feels very much as if they were written after the event with their best memory. It's been incredibly hard. It's taken me 5 years to actually pick them up again and read them. But I wanted to do that ahead of today. And sadly, it was upsetting because there's just such contradictions and sadly untruths in there.
In terms of others in your group, you tell us at paragraph 57 that just under half of your group, that's 49%, said that they had issues relating to accessing information, and significant numbers raised concerns about hospital complaints systems, that's 40%, and access to medical records, 34%. And as a result of this, members who had experienced those difficulties felt as though they had lost control and they had let their loved ones down. So that demonstrates, does it not, the impact on somebody of not being able to get the answers to the questions that they have.
Absolutely. Just as I said, it just adds to the trauma, it adds to the grief and adds to the guilt.
The inquiry has received evidence from the Chief Coroner about the manner in which inquests and the coronial system changed during the pandemic. And that is reflected in what you tell us at paragraph 44 in your witness statement. You say many inquests had to be adjourned, particularly complex cases and those requiring juries, although some urgent hearings did go ahead for those members of your organisation. Restrictions were later eased, but there was, of course, by that time, a backlog of inquests. Did your members report to you that they had had difficulty, first of all, persuading a coroner to hold an inquest in certain circumstances, and secondly, even if that was successful, in making sure that the inquest eventually took place?
Absolutely. It was, again, just another battle. And yes, they faced long delays. I believe some are still waiting.
finally, I'd like to turn to lessons learned, which you set out at paragraph 61 in your witness statement. You say that your organisation invites the inquiry to make recommendations in the following areas based upon widespread experiences of your group. The development of a framework or guidance to ensure proper communication with family members during end-of-life care, better planning for clear and consistent guidance throughout all regions of post-death procedures, better planning and consideration of religious and cultural procedures during the decision-making process, the development of bereavement counselling following a death in a pandemic or a national health emergency, consideration of the long-term impact of COVID on bereaved children, and a higher level of planning to mitigate the social stigma that some believe is attached to bereavement during a pandemic. And finally, stringent enforcement of restrictions on official personnel.
Yeah.
Mrs. Sherwood, thank you very much. Is there anything else that you would like to add to that list, or anything else that you would like to say to my lady?
I would like to say about, I guess now, this is module 10, and there's been 2 interim reports, module reports that have been released. Module 3 will, I believe, should address the need for the proper communications, as you say, for lessons learnt. If I could ask for that to be robust recommendations, please, so that we don't have, any families being treated the way we were, as we were just describing. And also, I guess it's about the promises I've first heard, your lady, that your promises, I met you the 22nd of March at Belfast Hastings Hotel, where you heard from some of our group members at their experiences. And just picking up on some of the promises there, that the bereaved would be at the heart of the inquiry will be fair and thorough, and the interim reports will be released ASAP. Just please may I ask that to be demonstrated, to be upheld and available to the timeline. I believe module 10 will be in the first half of next year. We've just been let down. And our loved ones for so long. Please just help us process what's happened and avoid anyone else going through just the unmeasurable pain we, the bereaved, have by learning from the mistake.
Blackwell.
My lady, the next witness is Ms. Rivka Gottlieb. May she be sworn, please?
Bible and repeat after me. I swear by Almighty God.
I swear by Almighty God
That the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Please thank you.
I hope you've been well looked after.
I have.
While you've been waiting.
Thank you.
Difficult time for you, I know.
Will you begin, please, by giving us your full name?
Rivka Gottlieb.
Thank you, Ms. Gottlieb. You should have before you a copy of your witness statement. It bears our reference INQ 000659978. Please, can you confirm that that is the statement you have provided to the inquiry
It is.
and that it's true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
It is.
Thank you. Ms. Gottlieb, you've come today to tell us the story of your father and his sad passing, and to explain the impact that that has had upon you and your family. Your father, Michael, died from COVID-19 on the 17th of April of 2020. He was 73 years old. And you describe him at the time of his death, or just prior to his death, as having been in reasonably good health. Yes.
Yes.
He was semi-retired. You tell us that he was working part-time at Muswell Hill Golf Club in North London.
Yes.
He was teaching children at your synagogue. And he was also an exam invigilator. Is that right?
Yes.
You describe him as kind, generous, warm and funny, and as a people person who was always ready to crack a joke.
Yes.
Is that right? In early March of 2020, You say that you saw the devastating scenes that were happening in Italy and Spain and believed that it was only a matter of time before COVID came to the UK, and indeed it did. You say that you tried to protect your parents and advised them not to go out, but your father insisted that as long as he followed government advice, which at the time was simply to wash hands, he would be fine. And about a week before the first national lockdown, Muswell Hill Golf Club told him to stop coming to work because he was over 70.
Yes, they were concerned because, as we all knew at the time, it was affecting older people more, and they wanted to protect him.
How did he feel about being told to stay at home?
He was not happy at all. He was very much a people person and very social. And although he wasn't able to go to work in that last week, he was out and about, going to the shops, doing the sort of normal things and taking the precautions that he thought he should be taking.
Yes. You say that he had rheumatoid arthritis, which you later found out was a pre-existing condition that would put him at increased risk,
Yes.
but you didn't know that at the time.
We didn't know that at the time, and I think if we had known that, it would have made a bit of a difference to his level of caution.
He first began to show symptoms of COVID-19 on the 22nd of March of 2020, which of course was the day before the first national lockdown was imposed. And his GP practice told him to call NHS 111 for some advice, which he did, you say, repeatedly.
It was very difficult to get through. It would take hours to get through, and we have heard in other modules the problems within the NHS 111 service. The other problem was that it was a script that his condition and his age and his health was not taken into account. He was simply told, stay at home, take paracetamol, and that's it. That was the advice that was given.
Over the following 10 days, did his symptoms worsen?
His symptoms deteriorated. They followed the pattern of what we were reading in the news about, and we were looking it up. It was horrifying. It was terrifying. He knew that he had COVID. He knew he had all the symptoms, although there was no testing at the time. And his temperature would go up and down. He couldn't, he was coughing so much that he couldn't really speak. So we were mostly texting. We weren't really able to speak much on the phone because he just couldn't speak and breathe. And the weird thing about COVID, as we know, is that your energy levels will sort of go up and down. So one day he seemed fine, and then there was a decline. But when we eventually did get medical attention, there was a family friend who's a doctor, a friend of my brother's, who coached us on what to say in order to get the paramedics round to examine him. And when they examined him, they put him straight into the ambulance, and he walked to the ambulance. So we fully expected him to come home and took him into hospital.
Just going back a little bit,
Yes.
if I may. He lived with your mother,
Yes.
didn't he? But they were being really careful
Yes.
between the two of them not to have too much contact
They were
between
in
them.
separate rooms, and my mother was taking him food on a tray, but somehow she still managed to catch it, and she was hospitalised 2 days after he was.
Before he went into hospital, was he scared?
Terrified.
And your mother too?
Yes.
He was admitted to hospital on the 31st of March, and you say that he was initially given oxygen
Yes.
and put on a CPAP machine. And when those didn't sufficiently help, he was sedated and placed on a ventilator on the 3rd of April.
Yes.
And your last contact with him was via WhatsApp on a chat message because he found it very difficult to speak because of the coughing. And so he was only able to text you.
Yes.
Were you allowed to visit him?
No.
How did you find that as a family?
At the time, we completely understood because this was an infectious disease and people were dying, and the precautions made sense. What didn't make sense to us as a family was that these precautions hadn't been put in place earlier. And actually, the findings of Module 2 really were extremely relevant to us because my father is one of those people who could have been saved had the lockdown happened a week earlier.
And the day before your father was placed on a ventilator, your mother was admitted to hospital on the 2nd of April, wasn't she?
Yes.
Although they were in the same hospital,
Yes.
they were not on the same ward.
No.
They were not allowed to speak to each other or to spend any time with each other.
I don't know exactly what happened, but they were in completely separate areas, and my father was taken to ICU the next day anyway.
Right. You say that that week you thought you might lose both your parents, and you describe it as a dark and terrifying time. You were telephoning the hospital for updates, and you were getting updates from the hospital, and you were scared every time the phone rang. You
So
described.
my brother was the person who was in touch with the hospital, and he got an update roughly once every 24 hours for each of them. And yes, every time the phone rang, I was expecting bad news. It was a couple of weeks of being on high alert. It was very surreal and very frightening.
Your mother was unable to eat due to her symptoms, which severely affected her.
Yes.
Eventually, she was allowed to return home, wasn't she?
Yes.
But you describe her as being extremely weak and in so much pain that she had to crawl up the stairs to get into bed.
Yes. And because of the rules at the time, we didn't know whether we could look after her. The rules were not clear.
So was she on her own?
She was on her own.
You say the days and weeks that followed felt like a nightmare as you waited for news of your father, and his condition continued to worsen, and you were told on the 16th of April that he wouldn't recover. You were told that one member of the family could go to hospital to say goodbye,
Yes.
which you describe as an impossible choice.
It was. There's my mother, there's my brother and I. My mother was in no fit state to go anywhere, and my brother and I weren't willing to make the choice. And I think there was a part of me that also didn't want to see him in that state. He was unconscious. It wouldn't have made a difference, my being there. But I am haunted by the fact that he died alone and that we were not able to be with him.
You say you made the agonising decision that neither you nor your brother would attend, and in the knowledge that your father was unconscious, and that you were not offered a video call.
Not as far as I can recall, no.
The following day, your brother was told that your father had died shortly after the life support system had been reduced, not even turned off.
Yes.
And your brother phoned you to let you know. And then you spoke to your mother also.
Yes, and my mother is still traumatised by the fact no one was with her when she was told the news that her husband had died.
You say that despite expecting the news for a few days before it arrived, you were all in shock when the information was passed to you. And you say that your parents have been married for 52 years. And that your mother has repeatedly told you since that your father, was her best friend. After you had all been told that your father had passed away, did you get together to see each other and to comfort each other?
No, we couldn't. The rules were the rules, which, again, we understood. We now knew the devastating consequences of this disease. There was no way that we were going to put each other at risk.
You tell us at paragraph 13 that there are Jewish burial and mourning rituals which are important to your faith and that you were not able to follow. And you talk about it being normal Jewish practice to never leave a body alone between death and burial. But due to the restrictions, that could not be honoured. You couldn't sit with your father's body.
That's right.
You also explain how there are Jewish rituals of preparing a body
Yes.
to be buried washing and dressing. And again, that
None of
wasn't
this.
something that you could do, that your father's body was sealed in a body bag.
Yes.
And it's important in your religion as well that the body be buried in a simple wooden coffin so that it biodegrades together with the body.
Yes.
And again, that wasn't something that could be achieved.
No.
You would have expected in normal circumstances to have been allowed to go to the graveside.
Yes, that was very odd because we were outdoors. We couldn't really understand why we were told that we couldn't go to the graveside for the actual lowering of the coffin. I believe it was to protect the cemetery workers because so little was understood about how COVID was transmitted at the time, which makes sense, but it wasn't actually explained to us at the time. And there were no clear rules or guidance about this. So I think different cemeteries and different places had different rules.
Yes. And in terms of the rules in place at the time about what was to be permitted so far as funerals were concerned, you say that you were eventually told that immediate family members would only be allowed to attend.
Yeah.
And this presented an immediate problem in how to get your mother to the cemetery because she was too unwell to drive herself. And you didn't think it was appropriate for her to go on her own in a taxi.
No.
So your brother decided that he would bring her. You were only allowed to stand outside.
We
as you
stood
say.
outside in separate household groups. We weren't even allowed to stand near each other. So, yeah.
And there were only 9 people, including the rabbi.
And someone who worked for the cemetery.
Right. You describe how you couldn't have a quorum of 10 Jewish adults that are required to perform certain prayers
That's
at
right.
the funeral.
At the funeral or afterwards,
Or
because there were no
afterwards.
gatherings, there were no services.
You say, in terms of rituals after the funeral, memorial prayers were held all over Zoom
Yes.
as part of the Shiva, which is the 7-day period after burial. And that those online services felt surreal.
Very much so. It was very, very odd. It's a very odd thing to be gathering to remember someone who was so loved and so popular through a screen. I mean, the good thing was that family members from abroad could join us, but they would have been there in person in other circumstances. But it was very, very strange.
And you go on to say that as the synagogue was closed, the only opportunity to recite prayers that mourners say for the first year following the loss of a parent was online.
Yes.
Which again raised difficulties for observant Jews.
For Sabbath observance, yes.
Yeah. However, you say that the Zoom services became a lifeline for you and many others, but because they didn't technically comply with Jewish law, some people felt that they were unable to access them.
And I didn't access them initially. Before my father died, I had, this was not something I was going to do, but I felt so disconnected and so isolated that in the end I made the decision that this is what I needed. And my online community became very important.
Yes, you go on to describe how throughout your father's illness and beyond, you were supported remotely by your rabbi, and others in the community had also died from COVID, and you say clergy and community leaders were working very hard in what you describe as impossible circumstances to support bereaved families, as well as to help the community feel less isolated.
I think the isolation for a lot of people was very, very difficult, and not just the bereaved.
I'd like to ask you about bereavement and COVID grief, please, because you were working part-time as a music therapist, weren't you? Working with vulnerable adults and also in schools before the pandemic
Yes.
hit. And you say that going back to March of 2020, it was becoming increasingly clear to you that you would need to stop face-to-face work, and you were looking to working online. And at the time, you were also working for your synagogue as Director of Programming and Communications. So how did you manage, and did you manage to move both of those aspects of your working life online?
So my therapy work, I did not succeed in working online at the time because of what was happening with my father. And I had to stop working as a therapist for a period of time because I was grieving and because I needed to take care of myself. The synagogue work took over everything, actually, and it became a distraction, perhaps, and it was perhaps useful in that I had another focus, but I worked very hard getting all of the synagogue activities online. We set up Zoom accounts. We sent out daily emails to the community to help people feel less alone. We created new programming that people could access remotely. There was so much going on, and there were telephone trees and people calling each other, and an enormous amount of support. It was extraordinary, actually, what the community was able to do. But that's where my energy and focus went in those really dark, bleak days.
And have any of those systems, the changes online and the telephone systems, remained beyond the pandemic?
I think, yes. I think there are certain things, streaming of Sabbath services, live streaming in a way that is compliant with Sabbath rules has actually continued, and a number of other things have been retained. So there were learnings that were useful, yes.
You say that it was through your brother that you discovered the Facebook group of the COVID Bereaved Families for Justice UK, and you connected with the group. Tell us how that has supported you throughout the pandemic and the difficulties that you have experienced personally.
It's been incredibly supportive because I think only others who have been through what we went through can really understand. COVID bereavement is quite different to other types of bereavement, as the inquiry has been hearing. The group itself is extraordinary and allowed me to channel my anger, which was a very strong, forceful energy, and to make meaning out of my father's loss. He was someone who believed in justice and believed in what was right. He had enormous integrity, and I believe he would have supported what I've been doing with the COVID Bereaved group.
Yes. May we touch upon your personal difficulties, and by that I mean the physical difficulties that you have suffered with following on from your father's death. You talk about your own condition deteriorating, you being diagnosed with severe anemia.
Yes.
That your mental health deteriorated.
Yes.
You became very depressed and very anxious, and you describe in the immediate months following your father's death an inability to return to anything like normal life.
Well, first of all, we were still in lockdown. It was impossible, and I think one of the reasons that my grief became more complicated and more prolonged was because we couldn't return to normal life, and therefore the loss wasn't integrated. This is, I think, true for everybody who lost somebody to COVID or otherwise at that time. There was no normal life to return back to. And in terms of my own health, the messaging from the government was not to overload the NHS, so I really just neglected what needed. I needed simple blood tests, I needed simple monitoring, and none of that happened. And I actually remember in June 2022 walking to the hospital and seeing on my phone the news that the COVID inquiry was starting that day. And I had a blood test that day, and that night I had a call from the NHS service telling me that I had severe anemia and needed to go to A&E. It was all very strange, but it took that long. And it may have in part explained the depression, I don't know. But I was depressed, and I was diagnosed with PTSD and anxiety. And returning to normal life was extremely difficult. Knowing that COVID is still around, people are still affected. And I also want to talk about long COVID, My mother suffers from long COVID.
Yes.
It's extremely severe and debilitating. A lot of people are suffering from long COVID, and it is still happening. People are still getting sick and still coming down with this disease that there is no cure for, that there are no useful treatments for.
You describe your mother's symptoms in these terms, that she rarely goes out as she suffers from chronic fatigue, as well as breathing difficulties, brain fog, and almost constant stomach pain. And she is also severely depressed.
Yes.
And her grief over your father's loss is still profound.
Yes.
You say that shortly after her release from hospital and your father's death, your mother was contacted by the hospital as part of her post-COVID follow-up, that they were concerned by her low mood and that she was offered some telephone counselling. But you say that felt impersonal and it was also the wrong time for her, really. Has she received any further assistance?
Her mother died in November 21, and she hadn't been able to see her for about 3 years because of ill health and then COVID. So she was in pieces all over again. And at that point, I was able to persuade her, and I referred her to NHS talking therapies, and she had a period of therapy, which was helpful while it lasted, but it's limited. NHS therapy is always limited, and this was the problem. They ended it, and she needs ongoing support.
You say that being so closely connected to the COVID group has meant that the issues affecting its members have often affected you too. It's been, you describe as being so tough at times, and due to lack of services, you've had to support some mentally unwell people in the group, as well as learn how to deal with complex grief and trauma within the group. You say carrying other people's anger and disbelief and having to arrange mental health support for suicidal people from miles away, with services not running properly, was horrific.
This is particularly true for the incredible people who run the Facebook group, the admin team. They moderate the group, they pick up on what's happening in the group, and they flag up safeguarding issues. I support them, I don't directly support the people in the group. So I hear about these really difficult situations, and they are heroes.
And finally, you say, a prominent question you still ask is how society will react to the next pandemic, given the issues and misinformation still present.
This worries me enormously. We're living in a very strange time where there is an awful lot of misinformation and a lot of mistrust of systems and the systems that are there to protect us, in large part due to the behaviour of the government at the time, the Partygate scandal, for example, but not only because of that. I strongly believe that we need a national oversight mechanism and the Hillsborough Law to be implemented. These are really, really important to safeguard against. We need laws with teeth, basically, and we don't have that at the moment. There is a duty of candour, and yet see what happened. I also feel that the attitudes need to change. There needs to be much more of a precautionary approach, and there needs to be much more transparency in government decision making, so we understand how decisions are made and who's listened to who and on what basis decisions are made, because that was all absent at the time. And government must learn to listen. There is so much to be learned from the experiences of ordinary people that is missed otherwise. Just as this inquiry, I think, has learned a great deal from listening to the people who were affected directly. Themes have come up, all sorts of things that perhaps would have been missed otherwise. And this is true for government as well. And it's also a way to build trust. And I really hope that these sorts of things will go into your recommendations, my lady. There are ongoing issues today that could be so easily addressed. Wider access to vaccination, for example, legislation around air quality. These sorts of things, mask wearing in healthcare settings that would protect the vulnerable. These are simple things, but they've become so politicised, and this worries me, and the discourse worries me enormously.
Ms Gottlieb, thank you very much for your evidence. Those are all my questions, my lady.
Ms Gottlieb, I noticed from your statement that you said after years of association with the synagogue, you felt that you had to give it up. Have you managed to restore your relationship?
I have I've had to re-evaluate it, and it's changed. I now run a therapy group actually for singing for memory for people with dementia at the synagogue, which I love, and I participate as a member more now. But it's been really, really hard.
I can imagine, because it would have been so much part of your life.
Yes, it has been.
Thank you very much indeed for your help. It's been an extremely interesting session. One of the witnesses described bereaved people as like the swan, with calm on the top and feet going underneath, or things going on underneath. You seem extraordinarily calm, and I wonder what the feet are doing underneath the water.
I do want to ask, if I may, you've a number of times said that it's over to us to make sure recommendations are implemented, and I would like to appeal to you to please not do that, because for us it's extremely painful and extremely difficult, and you're not seeing the feet paddling underneath, but actually the inquiry was supposed to be us passing the baton and for the government then to pick up from your recommendations, and this really matters to us. We will, of course, keep supporting the recommendations of the inquiry and pushing from our end, but it really should be the inquiry that holds the government's feet to the fire and makes sure that they implement the recommendations that you make.
I totally understand that.
Yeah.
The problem is my time comes to an end. I have absolutely no powers once the inquiry is ended. And I appreciate that other people may have done things that go beyond their actual powers. But once, I'm afraid I'm a strict lawyer, and once the inquiry finishes,
Yeah.
I won't have any powers at all. And I don't necessarily have the powers in public opinion, whereas I suspect some of your members, I'm not suggesting all of them, obviously. For those of you who find it too distressing, then please don't. But I think there'd be some who might be able to do it and would like to do it. But if that's distressing, then please just ignore what I've said. The last thing I intended was to distress you.
I appreciate that. Thank you, my lady.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. My lady, the final witness for today, and for the module, in fact, is Katherine Poole, and she is going to appear at the hearing remotely. There she is. She's just popped up on my screen. Miss Poole, we're just rearranging the room. If you just bear with us, please. Yes. My lady, Katherine Poole. May she be sworn.
Good afternoon, Miss Paul. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay, if you'd like to repeat after me, please. I do solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you.
Will you begin by giving us your full name, please?
Yes, my name's Katherine Poole.
Thank you. Is it Ms. or Mrs. Poole?
It's Mrs.
Mrs. Poole. Well, Mrs. Poole, you should have before you your witness statement, which bears our reference INQ 000 660030. Please, can you confirm that that is the statement that you've given to Module 10?
I can confirm, yes.
Thank you. And can you also confirm that the contents of the statement are true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
They are.
Thank you. Mrs. Poole, I'd like you to tell us about your father, please, John Hoare, who passed away from COVID-19 on the 31st of March of 2020, aged 62. And you describe him as a lovely man, loved by all who knew him, quiet, he kept himself to himself, but he loved his family and he saw a lot of them. Is that right?
That's right, yes. He loved his music as well. He was someone that you'd want in your team on a music quiz. And he was also very knowledgeable about nature.
You were incredibly close to your father because you had been one of his main carers for most of his life, well, for most of your life, hadn't you?
I had, yes. He was first ill with the mental health illness in 1985 when I was born. So I jointly cared with my mother, and then I took over the main role as carer when my mum and dad divorced.
Did you live with your father?
Well, up until around about 2010, but then I moved out and I lived with my husband and children.
You have 2 children, is that right?
I do, yes.
Yes. Your father was first diagnosed with a mental health condition back in 1985, I think you say, and that was schizophrenia. And then in 1997, he was given a diagnosis of schizoaffective disorder. And in January of 2020, did he go into hospital with an acute kidney injury? And did he acquire pneumonia whilst he was in hospital?
He did, yes. He went into a general hospital. And then when he was discharged to a rehabilitation care home. And that rehabilitation care home was to give him the opportunity of having physiotherapists, occupational therapists, and all staff there who could look after him 24/7. Particularly as my children were 2 and 4 at the time, I was trying to look after them. In hindsight, I would probably say I wouldn't have sent him there, but hindsight's a wonderful thing.
Of course. So when he was discharged into the care home, what was the medication that he was on?
So he had a lot of medication, but the important one was lithium.
Yes.
That he had to help his schizoaffective disorder and his mental health condition. And he was discharged with lithium citrate. But once the discharge medications had ended, there was an oversight by the GP, and he didn't get his lithium citrate again until it was the 5th of March 2020.
So he received his lithium medication until the 24th of January, I think. And he was then told by a GP following a blood test that would need to be continued. But between the 4th of February and the 5th of March, he didn't receive any lithium, did he?
That's correct. Yeah.
And so by the time the prescription was provided again, you say that his mental health had deteriorated so much that he was detained under Section 4 of the Mental Health Act. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And so where did he go to once he'd been detained?
So he went to a mental health hospital and he was detained there on the 6th of March, the early hours of the 6th of March.
You say that all forms of contact and what you describe as any right to a family life were then removed from him and from you and from your family. So were you able to visit your father and to speak to him?
Not once he was in the mental health unit. Initially, they told me it was due to his presentation. But then as lockdown was approaching, I'd heard on media channels that lockdown was approaching. So I asked if I could see him, given that they were going to be restricting visits. I was then told by the mental health unit staff that they hadn't heard this was happening, and I would be able to see him as soon as his mental health had stabilised. This is something that I find difficult to understand. If I was aware that lockdown was approaching, why were the staff there not aware? And also the fact that they know their service users and clientele better than anyone. Why weren't they doing something to protect their service users and their facilities more? Why were they not doing more proactively? Why were they waiting for government?
So you weren't allowed to see him or physically have contact with him. Were there any alternative arrangements made for you to be able to maintain contact with your father?
No, so I contacted them every day. I would be ringing and I asked if I provided a device, would it be possible for them to do a video call with me and him? That was refused. telephone contact was refused, face-to-face contact was refused. I just came up against a barrier. Every time I suggested something to try and have that contact, they said that couldn't happen. There was no way that could happen. I even asked if I could see the CCTV so that it could assure me of his well-being and how he was. I mean, the last thing that my dad said to me was, "You won't leave me, will you?" That was on the 5th of March. I said I wouldn't because I had no intention of leaving him. That will stay with me forever because ultimately I did leave him. Not through my choice, but through what happened.
I'm so sorry. Yes.
Sorry.
No, not at all. It was my fault. You took a handwritten card and photographs of the family to the mental health unit, didn't you?
I did, yes. And he hugged them. It's documented in his notes that I managed to get access to after that he hugged them. So it just showed that he did still know who we were. And I think he would have benefited from having that family life. It's very difficult to think that he didn't have us there, and we could have helped in his recovery as well.
Were you receiving any updates from the staff at the mental health unit about how your father was doing?
I received limited updates. I mean, for example, he had some physical health conditions, and they would ask me, he had some problem with his kidneys. And they would ask me what would he like to drink, to try and encourage drinking and things. But it was limited. There was one point when he caught the COVID that he had a temperature, and I didn't find out about that until after his death, that he'd had this temperature.
Your father was taken back to the general hospital or moved over to the general hospital from the mental health unit on the 27th of March of 2020, at which point did communication with him improve at all?
No, if anything, it got worse. The general hospital, I rang them, and I mean, the day before he died, I rang and asked how he was doing. They said they couldn't update me. I said, I'll ring later on today then. And they said, no, we still won't be able to update you. So I had pretty much no communication whatsoever. I didn't know that he had a DNR on him. I was unaware of the treatment plans and the limitations to the treatment because it was not for NIV, which I believe is non-invasive ventilation. I had no idea on any of this. And I wanted to be his independent mental health advocate or IMHA, because he was sectioned. He had a right to an IMHA, but I wasn't allowed to do this. This is what I wanted. He had no one to do that because it wasn't just me, but the mental health staff. I asked if they would stay with him. He was on 2-to-1 care in the mental health unit, and I asked if mental health staff would stay with him. They told me they would initially, but then they left. And then I later found out that they'd put the DN ACPR and restrictions on the care that he would receive while staff weren't there. And I have to question why. And it's that parity of esteem that some of your other witnesses mentioned. Professor Desmunshi and Professor Osborne mentioned that having that mental and physical health working together for someone complex like my dad.
You say at paragraph 18 in your statement that had you been able to intervene on behalf of your father, you would have suggested a multidisciplinary meeting, and you feel that that such a large decision should have been made jointly with your input on his behalf.
I do. I mean, I believe in the triangle of care. That is where there's the carer, the professionals and the service user. I believe everyone should have had a say in what happened for him. I don't think it should just be one consultant from the general hospital who is qualified in the physical health. I mean, they said things like they'd put the DNR on because my dad was drowsy, but it was on sedatives for his mental health. So what would they expect? There should have been a multidisciplinary teamwork, and I can't understand why there wasn't.
How did you find out that your father had passed away?
I got a phone call early hours of the morning on the 31st of March 2020. It was rather abrupt, to be honest. Your dad's passed away, pretty much. That was pretty much all I got.
And you asked if you could go and see his body in the hospital, didn't you?
I did.
What were you told?
So I was told that he would be moved from the ward within the hour, and I couldn't get there within the hour. So then it would go to the mortuary. And then the hospital mortuary, that is. So I then asked if I could see him there. They told me that I wouldn't be able to see him there. I was just stopped from seeing him at all. Even when he was moved to the undertakers, then I was told I couldn't see his body then. It was just a closed casket. I asked if I could have a photo of him so that I knew that it was him, to give me that closure, because I still question, was it him in there? He'd been moved from the care home to the mental health unit to the general hospital, and at no point had I seen him. He was identified just by a wristband, which I hadn't seen this wristband. So how do I know that it was him? I know it sounds a bit silly to say that, but how do I know that that was him in there?
As well as asking for a picture of him, you also asked if you could have some fingerprints, didn't you? Which I think is something which you'd been able to do when your grandmother passed away.
I did, yes. We got these fingerprints when my granny, his mum, passed away, and it was the same undertaker. So I asked if I could get these fingerprints, and that was denied as well.
The funeral for your father was, in your words, extremely limited. There were only 10 mourners allowed to attend, and everybody had to stand outside, socially distanced. Is that right?
That's correct, yes. Yeah, we just had to stand at a distance. People who wanted to attend, who lived further away, couldn't. There was no video.
No live stream?
No live stream of it or anything.
What was the impact of only being able to celebrate your father's life in those circumstances?
It was major. I mean, it's part of the grieving process. It's part of the closure to be able to have a wake. We couldn't have a wake. It wasn't just mine as well. My children, they attended, and this is the first funeral that they have attended at age 2 and 4. This is not what you would class as normal funeral processions. It was awful. I've got a lot of grief that I wasn't able to give him send-off that he deserved. I wasn't able to be there with him in the last month of life, and I wasn't able to give him that send-off either. So there's a lot. It's like grief on top of a grief.
You describe that because of the circumstances in which your father had died, in that he was detained by the state at the time of his death, a coroner was instructed by the doctor at the General Hospital to hold an inquest, but that you were not really satisfied with the sorts of questions that were asked by the coroner. Is that right?
So the questions, they were okay, but they didn't touch on the COVID part of it. So I managed to sit with the mental health teams to discuss the care and treatment they'd had in mental health. But the physical health, the General Hospital, said that my answers should come from the inquest. But then because the coroner looked at the lead up to him being sectioned and he stopped lithium, they didn't really go into detail around the COVID aspect. So then when I went back to the General Hospital to ask them questions, I mean, it took over 3 years for the inquest. So I went back to ask these questions, and I was told that they wouldn't be able to remember what happened. Staff weren't there anymore. So I still have a lot of questions that are unanswered that I'm still trying to get answers to, and that closure would have helped. But I don't know if I will ever get that.
You say, I feel like my grief was further prolonged as I have had to look back on my father's story in pre-inquest documents and inquest proceedings, and I feel as if I'm still awaiting closure as I attempt to tie up all the loose ends, some of which, as you have just said, may never be finalised.
Yeah, I do.
You also tell us at paragraph 31 in your statement that being bereaved by COVID has impacted all aspects of your life greatly. You say that you've experienced severe anxiety in relation to COVID-19 and in health in general. And you said that you found it hard going out in public, particularly to busy places, and that you're still rather cautious going out at any time, but you continue to wear a mask, particularly when attending venues such as a medical practice.
That's right, yeah. I try to protect myself and my family as much as I can. I mean, my husband has long COVID as well, so I'm trying to protect him as well.
You say that your confidence in health and social care services has been impacted, and you find yourself being cautious of medical professionals.
I do, and I think sometimes the professionals think that I'm being a bit overzealous when I'm asking a lot of questions about care and treatment. Even though you should be able to, I think sometimes they wonder why I'm asking so many questions. I mean, I should add my GP was really good following my father's death and gave me a lot of support, but that was a GP that was known to me. I had a good rapport with them. They understood me, I understood them. And I think that's an important thing for those bereaved, having access to professionals who know them and are able to understand, and you're not having to retell your story as well.
Thank you. You say that you found it difficult to deal with the public attitude to COVID. Comments like COVID is just a flu or a cold are hard to listen to. And you say when you wear a mask, you feel it necessary to explain yourself, or you're told by strangers, oh, COVID is over, why are you wearing that?
Yeah, I had a shop worker come up to me and say, COVID is over, and I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but I hope you don't become too dependent on the mask. And also things like, if my dad died of COVID, he must have been ill anyway. Having to justify myself and my dad isn't beneficial. It's not something, if you died of something else, people wouldn't say that. Yeah, it's really difficult to deal with society's perception, some people in society's perception.
And then finally, Mrs. Poole, at paragraph 50, you say this: there must be a much more integrated, multidisciplinary working system in place with mental and physical health specialists able to provide holistic, appropriate care to individuals with severe mental impairment. There will always be questions in my mind of whether my father would still be here if physical health staff had assessed and treated him while in the mental health unit, and if mental health staff had been involved in decisions around his care in the general hospital.
Yeah, it comes down to that parity of esteem that was mentioned by your previous witnesses again, where mental health and physical health should be equal. And I feel that people with a mental health condition should be able to be treated for physical health conditions within the mental health unit, and people with in physical health units should be able to be treated for mental health. Everyone knows that they're interlinked, yet there's such a division there when people are in these settings.
Thank you, Mrs. Poole. Those are my questions. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
I think just in the mental health unit, my dad was on 2-to-1 care. He had safe holds, so there's such close proximity, and I can't understand why PPE and other things were not in these settings. We need to look at why there wasn't that equal access to these things. I mean, safe holds and 2-to-1 care, you can't get much closer to the service user. So these people need, even the staff as well, staff and the service users need protection, and something needs to be done about that just to make them more equal. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, my lady has heard you say that. Thank you, Mrs. Poole.
Thank you very much indeed, Mrs. Poole. Did you know you're the last witness, very last witness of the inquiry?
I did today. I noticed that. Yeah.
I didn't think I'd tell you before. I didn't want to add to the pressure that you'd be under, but yes, that completes the evidence. So tomorrow I'll be hearing closing submissions from all the lawyers. I don't know how whether or not you've got somebody with you or how distressing you found this experience, but it's been extremely helpful, and you've been a very eloquent final witness.
Thank you, and thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Not at all. Is it time to go and get the children tea now, or?
Maybe in a bit.
It depends on the child, I suppose. I always had 2 very hungry ones. Thank you very much indeed for your help. I'm really grateful to you.
Thank you.
Very well. There are some who said we wouldn't reach this stage by this time, but that completes the evidence, and tomorrow I shall hear closing submissions from the call participants.
At 10 o'clock, please, my lady.
10 o'clock tomorrow, please.